pulled out the 3 priorities that we as an organisation had identified. And in summary, the 3 priorities are what I would call the MDEC side of things, the work we do around about professional learning teachers in schools in Aberdeen City, Aberdeenshire, Moray, Orkney and Shetland. So that's the priority one, is around about that professional learning teachers across those 5 local authority areas. And that's done under the MDEC side of our work. The other side of our work, the priority 2, is about work we do within the communities that I mentioned and with partners. And that's a priority 2, is what I would call the Aberdeen for a Fairer World side of our work. So that's why we've sort of got this dual identity, and it's partly tied into where the funding comes from for different things. And then the third priority was around how we work. There's no point us going out and talking about these things if we're not, as an organisation, doing the things that we're trying to promote with others. So walking the talk or practicing the preaching. So the third priority is very much about how we operate in a sustainable way that considers fairness and equality and so on. So the report, the annual report is structured around that, the flipbook structured around that in this presentation. So we just walk you through those 3 priorities. Cheers, Natalie. So the first bit of the work, the work we do around that, it's important that we acknowledge that that work is part of a contract that the 5 development education centres have with Scottish Government. It's funded by Scottish Government and it's delivered free to schools. Okay, and it's about the professional learning of teachers. So appreciative of the work we have with the other DEC, the work we do with the other DECs, the work we do with Ian and other colleagues and with Scottish Government colleagues in terms of having as it's called, a log frame of priorities that are sitting in there. We work around about that log frame of priorities. We work with the other DECs to see where our different strengths are. And we work with the 5 local authorities and the schools in those local authorities to identify what the priority areas of work would be, both in a national sense, but also in a local context. So it's trying to bring all those things together into a programme that would work. Over the course of the reporting year, I'm very pleased to report that we engaged with 757 teachers across the 5 local authorities. And that's almost double the number we had the year before. So you'll see there the number from the year before. What I think is interesting, that scale of increase it's reflected across 4 of the 5 local authorities we work with. And there was a number of issues within Orkney that Natalie's been working on really over the front end of this year, and you've got in place a programme of activities that will be following through with Orkney post-summer. So we see that improvement being reflected in Orkney. We're very confident around about that as well. So it's important that it's seen that improvement seen across all of the areas in terms of getting back into things of equity and such like. Sorry, I'm scanning my notes here. Yeah, the second bullet point is quite an interesting one, because what I'm reporting would be a slightly different picture to what the other development education centres have seen. We were picking up last Easter time less of an appetite for online learning. A lot of the teachers, a lot of the schools were saying they kind of had enough of that. And could they meet more people? Could they have more discussions amongst themselves and with external people? So we tried to respond to that need by trying to support bespoke local delivery more. And so as a result of that, our numbers are showing that the sort of locally, the in-person is getting on for almost 700 of those, and so a big increase in the in-person and a decline in the online. What I would say in terms of where we're at right at this moment in time, we're trying to think about the balance of that, because there will be some remote areas that we can't be out on the road all the time, and that's not a good use of our time. So we need to get out some of the time, but we also need to be able to reach people online more. So it's trying to get that balance. And the third aspect of that we're looking at is around about anytime learning, because if it's online and you're saying it's a twilight on a Tuesday night from 4 to 5, teachers can't make that. So can we make more available in an anytime learning sort of sense? So we'll probably have 3 strings to the bow to allow people to engage with us in different ways. We think probably things like the anytime learning, people will dip into that, and then they'll say, can we then get a bit of a follow-up with that as an in-person session? Because I think, again, you'll know yourselves, you can get so much out of anytime learning or online learning, but the deeper engagement comes from speaking to your colleagues or from speaking to other people who are external to the thing as well. So that's kind of a scan through some of that. The best attended sessions there from the last year, the ones that either we're being asked for or the ones that we're feeling are worth, we're coming in the back of some of the national priorities, are the ones on the screen. I think we are looking at more around about with partners like GREC and like the Multicultural Centre, things around anti-racist education, and I know Ian might speak a little bit more about that in terms of national priorities. It is certainly more of a priority with some of the other decks, but you know, we are partly nudging more of a demand in that area, because we feel that it really does need to come more to the fore in the work we're doing. And certainly there was one of the requests we had in Shetland was, that was one of the angles we were asked to cover within that. So it's not one that we've avoided, it's just we try to respond to needs. So there's a bit of discussion we're having with the local authorities to say, is this on your agenda and can we support it in any way, shape or form? And we've got partners that will be able to do that as well. So that gives you a flavour of the sort of things. Interestingly, the next bullet point, things got busier through the year. You'll see Q1 and Q2, 227 across 2 quarters, across half the year. In the third quarter, we got to 229, and in the fourth quarter, it was about 301 teacher engagements we had. So it was just partly because of our change of strategy. From the summer onwards, we were more in-person delivery, and that's why those numbers jumped significantly. And it was also, I think it was just the nature of what was being on the offer. I think the front end of the year, if you characterize it or do a caricature of it, it was we had a lot of activity on offer, on the online offer, and you actually looked at the sign-ups and it looked like there's quite a large number of people going to come to sessions. And in reality, 10 sign-ups might produce 3 people, 50 sign-ups might produce half a dozen people. And so, whereas if you rock up to Lossiemouth High School, as we did one day, and they've said they'll have 90 teachers there, then there'll be 90 teachers there. You know, so it's more predictable to have those sort of numbers for the in-person. And so that's the sort of story behind those numbers in terms of how we did it. Next bullet point is important because we're trying to get across all of the sectors. Roughly, very roughly, it's about 6% of our activity was around about early years, and about 42% split between primary and secondary. That would compare with a few years back, we were probably more active in the primary sector, very little activity in early years, and not so much in secondary. So I'm quite pleased that we've got the balance of primary and secondary is about even, and we're seeing an increase in the early years settings. So, and again, there's good resources being developed around the early years. But done things for all initial teacher education in all 5 of the local authorities. So that's the early years, and then you've got the career long-term teachers in there, and particularly with Aberdeenshire and Shetland, we've done some work with school leadership teams, and it's important that Aberdeenshire have been really good at getting that articulation, saying it's all well and good having the initial teacher education side of things, but the schools aren't brought into it. You've got a keen new teacher who's keen to do all this, and you're not getting the support necessarily within the establishment they're working. So Aberdeenshire have got us working with the recently appointed head teachers to try to get that balance, that the school is ready for it, and the teachers we're seeing are then it's falling on fertile ground. So that's been good. That's been a good development, and one that we're having discussions with the other local authorities around. And the last bit, yeah, we've done a fair bit of work supporting the Education Scotland programme around about children's rights. I don't know if Maxine's on the call or not just now, but Maxine and the local authorities here have been very busy around about children's rights. and Natalia and I have trained trainers in the Education Scotland programme, and we get involved with that. That work is Education Scotland's work. It's not part of our contract with the DEC, so we've not double counted those. They count against Maxine's numbers in terms of deliveries, and they're not counted into our numbers. So we've probably seen about 100, 120 more teachers through this other piece of work we do. It's a benefit to us because we're seeing teachers from our schools, and the teachers then, Maxine wouldn't have the capacity to follow up any work with those schools, so she signposts them towards us. So we're often picking up bits that are on our contract off the back of that presence in those sessions. Okay, so that gives you a bit of a flavour for most of that. Right, draw breath. That's priority one. And there's even, sorry, I should have said the picture was of Natalia up in Lerwick in November, in the very beautiful Lerwick Town Hall, when in a 2-day visit up to Lerwick. And again, they were really appreciative of that. And it was a fab room.
I think I took a picture of you as well. But
I know, that's a picture I took of you, Natalia, rather than the one you took of me.
You say to the end of April 22, but I think it's to 23, isn't it? It's the actual report you're giving.
You're correct, that should be 2023. Sorry, that's a mistake on my slides. I'll change those slides. Thank you. Thank you, Nigel. That's the trouble when you proofread these things. You don't notice they're obvious. Thank you for pointing that out, and I will change those slides for what goes online. Thanks for that. Priority 2 is the work within the community groups, within the community around about the Sustainable Development Goals. Again, it's funded through our own reserves and through funds that we can access through specific activity. For example, we got involved with our partner NESCAN around about a Just Transition pilot project. And so we've been doing some work with them around about how we can involve children and young people within community-based deliberative democratic processes. Nicola will be doing a presentation later, so that is all I'm going to say about that. I will not steal your presentation. So it's an example of where a different stream of funding came in for some other work. And again, Ian, the distinction between the MDEC side of our work and this AFW side of our work in terms of our accounts and all of that, we're very scrupulous about what's counting where and separating out those pieces of work. We've been involved with some really interesting projects with Aberdeen University, where our trustees Pamela works at the university, and it's great get me into different contacts and things. One of those is with Aziz Mohammed. The picture there's Aziz at an event he did acknowledge the factory disaster in Rana Plaza. They've done some tremendous work around about the cotton industry in Bangladesh and the treatment of workers through the COVID pandemic. And Aziz is going to speak at our John Foster Memorial Lecture in the autumn time, and we'll have an hour's session on that particular topic. So that's a wee trailer for what's coming up soon. So that's been a great piece of work to be associated with and to work with, and we can draw some of that experience into our schools offer. The other thing that we're working on just now is with Rachel Shanks around with school uniforms, where ourselves, Education Scotland, the university and Poverty Action Group are looking at some work around about school uniform. There's going to be work coming out from Scottish Government later in the year around about that. And basically, without giving too much away, we're talking about affordability as one of three aspects. So affordability is one, sustainability is the second one, and the third one, where Rachel felt comfort was the way we would express it. So it's things like if you've got skin allergies and certain fabrics don't sit well with you, if you've got religious beliefs that mean certain clothing would be, so it brings in all aspects of comfort, not just look and feel, but also other aspects of feeling comfortable within your clothes and yourself, your identity and so on. So those piece of work, we're hoping it'll be launched, a softish launch fairly soon, probably within the next month. And it'll talk about those three strands of school wear. And so that'll be an interesting piece of work, and it'll tie in with Scottish Government, another thing that Scottish Government are doing. Mentioned links with Greg, and we work with Greg on things around about Holocaust Memorial Day and so on. We've also worked with Aberdeen Interfaith and Aberdeen Multicultural Centre. And Kat's just walking in the doors now. We'll be going along to the Mela Festival next weekend with Kat and colleagues, and that again is part of ensuring that we're working away with groups who are busy in multicultural aspects within the community. And our partnerships also include an awful lot around with food and fair trade and those sort of things. So again, with Martin and Seafine, with Roz and Repair What You Wear, we've done work both within the community to promote their work, but also to see connections between young people and the work that they're doing. And some of that also then falls across into the MDEC piece of work, where we might run a local professional learning session for teachers around about some of those things. So there's a whole lot of stuff there that I could speak for Scotland on around about SDG 12 and so on. There's probably other things here, and I should have mentioned as well that some of that things are likes of community cafes. We facilitate 4 community cafes around about fair trade with Kat and Claudia in Aberdeenshire. We do some lectures around about things around about One World Week or Fair Trade Fortnight. So there's various things that we do that are open to community in a more general sense. Right, that's a quick rattle through priority 2, a quick rattle through, an even quicker rattle through priority 3. It's about ensuring that we practice what the preacher mentioned that before, and so we subject ourselves to some fairly rigorous self-evaluation using a toolkit from Scotland's International Development Alliance. What that did was it let us go through in some detail all aspects of our work about effectiveness of an organisation working in this sort of sector. And as a result of that, we've taken action. So it's not just contemplating our navels, it's contemplating our navels and then doing something about I'm not going down that metaphor too far. Right, but we've taken action against some of the things. So for example, we've streamlined our governance procedures, structures and practices. We develop partnerships to see where we can add value to the communities that we're working with. We've managed our time and resources in a way which is sustainable, and that as those of you who are working in third sector organisations will know it's really challenging times to do that. And so we're trying to think, how do we get best value? How do we add value to the partners that we're working with? And supporting people within our organisation, but also within the organisations that we work with. And so it's thinking about the people as well. We've tried to provide partners with full and detailed reports. That's just very recently, we've, for example, given each local authority, we gave them a summary of their figures based on the reporting year, but they actually asked for something based on a school year as well. So just last week, put out the numbers based on a school year, because that will be useful to local authorities as they report back to their bosses in that. So people need information in particular ways or particular activity. We're responsive to that, and we report back to NESCAN, we report back to Scottish Government, and we report back to others. And I think we do that not to the minimum standard, but I think we go over and above in terms of making the information that partners need in order to justify their cases to the people who are actually passing out the money. And that, so we're trying to be very responsible in that sort of area. Right, that was a quick rattle through anything. I am happy to take questions.